To go back to Gaza, I know you all have said repeatedly that the situation and starvation that we're seeing is because Hamas is blocking progress, or you've said because the UN organizations aren't willing to work within the framework of GHF and then that Israel has set for aid distribution. We all acknowledge, obviously, that Israel controls Gaza's borders completely, and it is limiting food to the population because Hamas has not agreed to its terms. I know this question has been asked in many different ways. I'm going to try this way. To be clear, is the U.S. government okay with Israel allowing children and adult civilians to starve so long as Hamas and the UN refuse to play by Israel's rules for aid distribution?
I reject the premise of that question in terms of how that was set up. This
okay?
humanitarian catastrophe lies at the feet of Hamas, who could end this conflict today by releasing the hostages and laying down their arms. Hamas.
That suggests that short of Hamas doing that.
These kids are dying. Doctors don't have medicine. They don't have fuel.
This is something that we have dedicated. The president and the secretary have been dedicated to getting as much aid as we can into Gaza in a way where it is not being looted by Hamas. It is something that we...
Short of a change by Hamas, the U.S. government will stand by.
I'm going to answer this question. We have been dedicated to getting those 90 million meals into Gaza in a way where it has not been looted by Hamas. We have been dedicated to getting aid into Gaza. It is something that the Secretary and the President have talked about, worked for. These discussions of getting more aid into Gaza have been part of that ceasefire we are hoping for. But again, the blame of this lies at the feet of Hamas, and that is the fact of the matter.
Short of Hamas doing something, changing its behavior, the U.S. government will allow the situation to proceed as is.
The U.S. government is supporting an effort to get 90 million meals into Gaza. The U.S. government is supporting an effort to get as much aid as possible to the people that need it without it being looted by Hamas. That is the actions of the U.S. government in terms of supporting that effort, and we call on others to support that effort to get as much aid as we possibly can. Of course, it will never be enough. It is something we are continually working for, to get more and more aid in what ways we can without being looted by Hamas every single day.
Last question. Has President Trump seen images of the children or other civilians starving recently this week?
What I can speak to is President Trump's comments before that he has said publicly about wanting to get aid into Gaza. Yes.
Thank you. The criticism against the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is basically controlled by Israel. It's designed by Israel, is controlled by Israel, and therefore is weaponizing the food against the Palestinians. Where before the creation of the GHF, it was 400 points where people can access the food. Yesterday, the Jordanians managed to get 110 aid trucks, including baby formula and including flour. They work with WFP and they work with the World Central Kitchen. So there's an alternative to the GHF. Why can't the U.S. allow other countries to use this kind of method, especially in northern Gaza? Because the 4 points where the GHF is concentrated in the south. So people from the north cannot come to the south. So why can you encourage this method?
I flat out reject your characterization of Israel weaponizing aid. The only entity that has been weaponizing aid has been Hamas. Through the looting of aid, the weaponization of this population.
Can you say both?
What we have seen is an effort from the United States government, like I said, to get 90 million meals into Gaza during a war zone. We saw efforts.
But that's not enough.
We saw efforts to get to a ceasefire that Hamas has decided not to act in good faith to achieve. That is the reality here, and we're continuing to try to get aid into a war zone that exists only because of Hamas. The war zone exists only because of Hamas, who could end the conflict tomorrow, who is weaponizing aid against the Gaza population. The first victims, as we said, are the Gaza population.
Okay, I have one more question. I want to ask a question on behalf of journalists in Gaza. You and other spokespeople behind this podium, they always talk about the freedom of expression, the value of our work. Our correspondents, including my own of Al Arabiya and my colleagues of AFP and every other journalist in Gaza, are unable to do their job because they are starving. They don't have food. How can you allow this to happen? And you tell us and tell everybody else that the work of journalists is vital, especially in a war zone. And yet you're now saying that it's Hamas who's controlling the food, and therefore we can't do anything about these people.
What I'm saying is Hamas is...
How can you help them? How can you
what
help
I'm saying
journalists
first on
in a
that
war
front,
zone?
in terms of the food, is that Hamas, through looting the food, has led to weaponization. They are weaponizing aid when they are able to. We have a system in place attempting to get as much aid into Gaza as possible in a way where it is not being looted by Hamas. That is the reality that we're seeing. That is the reality that we're pushing for, trying to get as much aid in there as we possibly can.